Alright, so hi guys, this is part 2 to my interview story times thing. Because when I did my first interview story time, where I talked about the horror story of when I was interviewed at this sandwich shop, I got quite a few comments of people who wanted to hear more of my interview stories. I don't know if I know I've talked about it, but I have some newer subscribers. There's people who don't really know. I've worked a lot of jobs before I became a full-time artist. Most of them were in retail. And so I just like wanted to narrow down the like three ones that stuck out the most in my mind. It was a very awkward time for me when I was trying to like get these jobs because I kind of hinted at it and I talked about it a little bit in my first video. But by the way, if you haven't seen it, I'll just boop it in the iCard in the corner there. I'm always bad at promoting my stuff, but anyway, that like the early 2010s was such a hard time to get a job for like everybody. Everybody I knew was having such a hard time. It's still hard now, but there were like none in the area I'd lived in. And I talked about why a big reason was because of the Obamacare thing. And it really was, but it wasn't because of Obamacare. It was because of the corporations caring more about their money than people. I had a friend who transferred over from another state who was getting full-time hours and was supposed to be getting guaranteed full-time hours when they moved, and it got dropped down to 8 because their tiny little retail store hired 50 people when you only needed 12. So that was very, very common back then. So also back then, my art wasn't doing well. A lot of people seem to think that like I've been making a lot of money off of my art for a long time. Yeah, that's not the case. I'd only say probably within the past like 4 years I've been making decent money. And I wouldn't even say it's a lot of money. I say it's decent because it justifies the fact that I don't have to go get another job. It pays my bills, it supports me, my husband has a job, and it's just that kind of situation. I don't like misconceptions of like I'm just ranking in all this money and, I mean, I wish I was. I'm sure a lot of people do, but that's just not how the world works sometimes. No, it is definitely not. So let's just get right into the story because I'm already rambling. But the first one I have here this is kind of the longest one, at least on my notes on my paper, ASMR. Which, by the way, this is dumb, but I did make a paper ASMR shirt. Like, if anybody wants to get it in my Redbubble, click my link tree. I'm gonna try promoting that a bit more without it sounding too forced. But, so... Jesus, I'm already going off. Alright, movie theater chain, because that's what I have highlighted. So, what happened was there was this movie theater chain, and they were looking for workers. Now, at this point, I had already had a part-time job, and my hours were dick, like everybody else I know. So I was making less than $100 a week with my one part-time job. And I was going to school still, but I just wasn't making enough money. I already had some debt racked up because I was a dumbass when I was younger. And I'm sitting here like, okay, I'm trying to go to school, I'm trying to do things, and I ended up living paycheck to paycheck because making less than $100 a week with debt isn't fun. So my brother worked at another chain in that thing, and he was the one that told me. So he told me like what to put in my resume, how to apply, and yada yada yada. So did all that. I got an interview. I was super excited, but this Lord was the first time I'd ever been a part of a group interview, and this was the biggest group interview I'd ever been a part of. And I hate group interviews. I'm sure a lot of people are going to agree with this. Group interviews are stupid. All right, there is no point for group interviews unless they literally need a bunch of people that are expendable. There's no other reason for it. They don't want people who have worked in it. They're just looking for the most desperate people in group interviews. People can fight me because the only people that ever won group interviews were the people who were the most committed to working this job. And I'll explain what I mean in a minute, because in my last one, my last little story here that does come into play there. So I came in and my brother told me, don't dress formal. Dress nice, but don't dress formal. And that was when I first learned for retail, you need to like ask other employees who were there what they wore to their interviews. When I was in high school and when I had my teacher's aide job, they always told me, wear a fucking pantsuit, okay? Or wear a dress. Like, be really fancy for your interviews. Don't do that for retail. Do not do that for retail. They're going to look at you like you're nuts. And they're going to think that you have money. I don't know if it's changed since then, but I remember any of my friends who did that, because I did have friends who had, like, homecoming suits or, like, really nice dresses. Not homecoming dresses, but they had, like, a nice, like, suit dress. Every time they would go to a retail place wearing an outfit like that, they never got a call back. The second they wore a nice outfit, they got a call back. Like, every time, even for the same places. So, a little bit of advice, ask around what you need for that job. So, got kind of a nice outfit, didn't have a lot of money, so it wasn't a lot of fun. But I go there, and they didn't tell me this was a group interview. So, I get there, and I'm expecting it's like one-on-one, but a lot of people are here because it's a movie theater, and it's normal. No, they just put all 20 of us in a room, and oh God, it was so weird. I remember they, like, asked us all these weird questions, and we played games. And I remember, like, myself and one other person were the only people who were like, this is supposed to be an interview, right? Like, for a job that we want to get hours for? Like, yeah, I was young, but, like, I needed hours. I needed money. I'm sure the other person did. So a bunch of other people were like, they were young teenagers, and they were just like, yeah, this is so cool. Oh my God, we get to ask questions and play games, and this is what a job is. Like, it's not, okay? It's not. It's a test, and they're testing it to see how you, like, stand out in a crowd so they can remember you when they try to call you back. Because they told us, like, don't bring in resumes, don't do this and that. And they gave us, like, little stickies with our names on them that we had to write. So they didn't even, like, remember who they called to these things. And they asked us questions that, like, had to do with the job, but then didn't have to do with the job. It was like, okay, what's your favorite movie? Or what's your favorite type of movie? And then you would talk about it. They go around in a circle and they do that. But then it would be like, well, what would you do on a Saturday night? Like, what's a fun night for you? Or, I remember something, what did I write down here? Or, oh yeah, if you were any movie theater snack, what would you be? And I remember being like, my brother didn't tell me about any of this stuff. Like, this is stupid. Why are they asking us these questions for a job interview? And, like, I was playing along and I was trying to have fun, but in the back of my head, I'm like, what's the point? Like, it's a job, not a game. And people wonder why some places are very, very ill-managed, and they also have, really bad customer service. So needless to say, I guess I won the interview, because me and the only other person that were, like, kind of answering seriously got the callbacks. And I had to talk about this, though. Oh, lordy. So I don't know if it's changed since my days of working these kind of jobs, but I remember back then, it was this terrible game of cat and mouse where you'd apply somewhere and it was just play and check in. Pretty much you could get a call back in a week, you could get a call back in 2 months. I once had an interview where they called me back 3 months later. I had literally forgotten that I applied there. And so, about 3 weeks later after the first interview, it was almost a month, so I remember being like, okay, my hours are still dick. I'm not really getting commissions. It sucks. Like, I'm cutting out meals in my day. It's not a fun time. But then I got the call back for my second interview, and I remember my brother was super, like, strict about this. He's like, listen, the most important thing they're going to ask you during the second interview is you have to sell them on this membership card. And I remember being like, oh, no, it's one of those things. And he was like, yeah, they are super strict about this membership card. They don't care about anything else. If you cannot sell this membership card, you're not getting the job. And I remember being like, great. Because I don't know about you guys, I don't Well, like I said in the beginning of the video, I'm bad at advertising myself. But I don't like promoting things that have no purpose, you know? Like, by that, you know, I have memberships to things that I go to quite often because I go to them quite often. So it makes more sense for me to do that. But if you're a person that goes to the movies maybe twice a year, there's no reason to buy a membership card thing unless you like lend it to friends or something, which you're not supposed to do. So, you know, it's like already there. But same would go for like when I worked retail in the stores, and they would be like, you gotta promote that stupid card, you know, even though half the people here probably already have the freaking card, you gotta promote it, because if you don't make enough of those sales with the promotes, it doesn't matter that you're great at your job, it doesn't matter you got great hours, it doesn't matter people love you, you don't sell enough of those fucking cards on your shift, bye-bye, Tammy, bye-bye. And it was always so fucking annoying. So my brother even gave me this pamphlet on like the questions to ask for selling the stupid card. And I remember I was very disheartened, but I studied that stupid pamphlet back to front, and I could recite it still to you now, but I'm not going to, because it's going to out the movie theater chain that I'm talking about, and I don't want to get into legal trouble. So I had the second interview, and this time it was technically a 1-on-2 interview. It was like, I don't know why there were two people there, unless the one lady, because they're both women, was like training the other lady to be a manager or something. But they asked me very basic interview questions, you know, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Why do you want to work here? What can you tell us about your last job? Yada, yada, you know, normal work questions. Why do you want to work here? That kind of stuff. And then they were like, okay, did you know that like we have to sell this membership card? So please try to sell us in the membership card. And I don't remember exactly what I said, but I did try to sell the card. What I wasn't expecting was them to like give me like questions back as a customer. So like they didn't tell me they were gonna like try to fight me on it. So, because I was honest, and I'm like, I which is dumb because I didn't get the job. But I remember the two ladies played off as like a couple or something, and then they were like, and they're like, oh hi, I want to go see some movie. And I was like, oh okay, but did you know if you have the membership card and blah 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 blah, spewing facts that I'm not going to say, you know, you can get extra points for like popcorn, movie, shows, and the normal spiel you ever notice when you go to movie theaters. And one of the ladies was like, okay, but I don't go to the movies a lot, so why should I buy this? And I remember being like, well, like I froze, because I wasn't expecting them to like fight me on it, which I mean, to be fair, people, you know, would, but then again, I feel like a lot of corporations don't understand people, and they'll just say no, and they won't really ask why. They'll just be like, no thank you, give me my ticket, you know. You know. Anyway, but I like froze, and I was like, oh well, you know, you can get points and it'll add up, or you know, maybe, you know, yeah, family visiting, you can take it out to like I botched it because I wasn't expecting that. And then the two managers kept fighting me on it. It's like, well, like, is it worth it? Because it's almost like the price of like, you know, going to the movie 3 times a year, and I only go like twice. And then I'm like, no, it's not worth it. And I kind of just said that, and I know it sounds dumb, and it's like, I have it because I go to this movie theater a lot, and I like this chain. But like, and obviously I didn't get the call back, but it was like, it was such a stupid question. I remember I asked my brother when I got home, I'm like, you didn't tell me they were gonna fight me on it. And he was like, oh, you probably didn't sell it well enough, so that's why they fought you on it, because that's happened to a couple of interviews I've had to watch in and on. And I'm like, oh well, great. So yeah, didn't get that movie theater job. Which sucks, because I do love movies, and I wouldn't mind working in a movie theater. Even now, if I could get like a part-time job at like my local theater, I probably wouldn't mind it too much. Especially if I was getting like no hours like I was back then, because at least it'd be like, okay, work 8 hours a week, that's fine, I still have time to do the rest of my stuff. But yeah, it's just, that was that. And then I tried applying to movie theater chains besides that, and it was always the same thing. Giant ass group interviews, you know. People weren't standing out. They weren't caring about people. They just wanted, you know, ants to work in the machine. But what can I say? All right. So my next one. My next one here is the bar interview. So at this time I was about 23-ish, maybe 22. No, maybe 24. I don't remember how old I was exactly. But I actually remember this was the summer before my YouTube blew up. I think this was the summer when I started doing like YouTube videos consistently. Was this summer, unless I'm wrong. I remember it was like when I started re-dyeing my hair again, because I hadn't done that in a long time. So I had bright purple hair at this time. And so what happened was I just wanted a summer job at that point. I was making decent enough off my commissions. I wasn't making a lot, but I was making enough to like not have to freak out. But I remember being like, I kind of want a summer job, some extra money here and there to help out. At that time, Cody and I were house sitting, I believe, for the first time or maybe the second time. So, we were kind of like on our own in a taste of freedom, paying all our own bills, paying all our own food, being on our own, even though we were paying rent. But that's not a story. So, it was like a taste of something that was just ours, because Cody's grandparents weren't there, so we could do whatever the fuck we wanted to the house. And this bar was within walking distance of the house. And I remember being like, this will be great. It's a bar job, so I can walk at night, so it's not as hot. I'm a night owl as it is. I'm currently recording this audio at like 2 in the fucking morning because it's summer here again, and it's the only coolest time I can record audio. But yeah, it was just so I remember that I like called in a day before my interview, and I remember asking like, oh, hi, is there anything I should know? I've never worked at a bar before. I would like to know. And whoever answered told me something like, be prepared for like something that is going to suck about working at a bar. And I remember being like, excuse me? She's like, yeah, it's a big question. I remember I called my mom because I had at that point I had a lot of jobs and I've had a lot of interviews, and I've never in a single interview until this one did I ever have an interviewer ask me, now what's something what's something terrible about working in a bar, or working in a yogurt shop, or working at a grocery store, or working at a taco stand? Like, I've never had that question. In fact, you're like openly supposed to not say negative stuff when you're doing an interview. So I remember like trying to like think of like a positive but negative thing. And so I show up and it was a group interview. Surprise. But this time I dressed a little nicer. I wore like a blazer. I did some makeup, There was the other lady who was also dressed the same as me. And then there was a lady who looked like she just kind of came out of bed. I don't know what happened to her. She seemed very nice, but she just wore like sweats, a shirt with holes in it, and her hair was all messy, and clearly she was having a bad day. So, but it was all women, and we get there, and it was, again, ironically enough, 2 interviewers there. And they didn't like take us to a part of the back room or anything, or like an office. They just did it in the middle of the bar. But then again, the interview was in the middle of the day, so there was normally there, so it was probably before hours. But either way, I thought it was weird. But yeah, they asked us, God, all of the questions in that one were so stupid. I remember they asked us stuff, again, where it was like, what's our favorite drink? Why do I want to work at a bar? Did you know that if you work at a bar, you're going to have to work weird hours, and you have to share tips, and it was like, yeah, we're answering with fake smiles, like, well, okay, just, we're here because we need money. Like, most people don't really get retail jobs because they have an extreme passion for working at a bar. I mean, some people might, but not most. So, it went around in a circle. They asked us to take turns. And then it got to that question, that whole, what does it suck about working at a bar? And the other 2 girls were so surprised by the question, and I was just like, okay, I practiced this. And I remember saying something like, oh, well, it's a bar, so you're going to have to work on holidays, and you're going to have to work late nights, and you're going to have to, spend time away from your family, which can suck, but I mean, you're getting holiday pay. And I guess that was the wrong thing to say, because they both glared at me, and I remember being like, well, I bombed this interview too. And yeah, I never got a call back. And ironically enough, I went back to that bar like a couple months later, and neither of the ladies I had the interview with got the job either. And they still had that help wanted sign. And from what I remember, like, they always had a help wanted sign, so I'm guessing that bar was a very fast turnaround place. But yeah, that interview sucked, and it was very disheartening. And then I'm going to go back in time a bit because the bar one was one of my more recent ones, which I know sounds weird saying it's like recent because it wasn't recent. But that was like one of the last few that I had before I just was able to do this, full time and not have to worry about it too much. So the next one, and I don't mind naming this place because I loved working here, and I don't know if things have changed, so no tea, no shade, but this is when I got my interview at Target. So I applied to a Target because I went on Craigslist. Keynote, I don't know if it's still like this, but people, whatever you do not apply to those stupid how to get a job websites where they're like, if you put our resume into our algorithm, we'll send it out to a bunch of places and you'll get called back. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's the biggest mistake I ever made because there was a desperate point in my life where I applied to those. I never got a single call back. Every time I got a fucking phone call, it was from some college rep trying to be like, hey, did you know that if you go to college, you'll make more money? And it's like, yeah, but I can't afford college right now, Tom. Like, please lose my number. Get my number off this list. And it was always different people. But it was always so freaking annoying. So yeah, a friend of mine was like, just check Craigslist. Check Craigslist for like retail open ads, and that's where I found Target. And there was like, I applied for a bit to work at a bookstore, and it was like, again, just look for Craigslist. Especially for retail places, you might want to be careful if it's like a private nanny or something, or something very private, do it with a friend. Be safe, don't be stupid. Anyway, I saw that Target was hiring, and fun fact, when I was growing up, my dad actually worked in a Target warehouse for like most of my childhood, so Target always had a special place in my heart. So I remember being excited, and I applied, and I didn't hear anything back for months, to the point where I actually forgot I applied to Target because I'd been applying to other places. And then I remembered I was working a small job, and I had just quit that job when it was right around winter season. I remember being like really depressed, but I had to quit. It was such a toxic environment. It messed with me mentally so bad. The money wasn't enough. It was a bad place. Very bad place for me. And so I got the call back, and I was super excited, and I told that the interview was also like the sandwich shop. The sandwich shop was in a different location than the actual place I applied for, but this time it was fine because it was still close by. And they did tell me, though, that it was going to be a long interview process and that you're only going to do a one-day interview. But the lady who I talked to, God, I wish I remember her name. She was so nice and so informative. She told me, she's like, be prepared to do stuff because you're probably going to do like 4 interviews in one day, but not in one sitting. And so, I showed up to the Target, and I went upstairs, and there was about 50 people there. And, all ages, races, sizes, genders, everybody was there. It was the winter holiday. And so I remember I sat there in my little goth attire, and I was like super nervous, but I was also like really excited because like this Target had like a break room, and it was so different than the other environments I'd been interviewing in that time, and everyone I was talking to was so nice, and it was all like, it wasn't full of a lot of people who were dead inside. I know it sounds bad to say, but there were a lot of people that I'd apply to work at, and they would just hate their lives and hate working there, which, to be fair, I mean, there were a lot of jobs that I was like that too. But, I never did that like 2 interviews, and I never did it to like other people to kind of bring them down because like I was never that kind of person. So anyway, we're going in there. They call us all by name, like one by one. So it took a long time. And I did my first interview. It was very basic interview questions. And then they were like, oh, okay, go back and have a seat. And I was like, oh, okay, should I like come back later? They're like, oh, no, you're going to do a second interview in like an hour. Just please go back into the waiting room and, hang out. And I remember being like, oh, and I was like so excited. I was so ecstatic. And so like I went back in the room, I had a big smile on my face. And, slowly one by one, they were weeding the people out. And, less and less people were coming back to the break room. And the weird thing about the interview, the only really weird thing was, it was different people interviewing me, but they kept asking the same questions. And I'm sure it was done to like see if people were lying, because, you know, a lot of people lie on their resumes and lie when they're doing job interviews. Surprise, surprise, because, you know, it's a really old joke, but I forgot like who said it, but it was something along the lines of like, yes, I want to work at a yogurt shop because I have a passion for frozen yogurt. It's like, no, I need money. Like, you know, very few people do. Not saying they don't, but it is a very small number. And so I remember that, you know, I was there longer. And then what ended up happening was on my last interview, the interviewer, which was another different person, they were like, okay, you got the job. And I remember being like, oh, what? And they were like, yeah, you got the job. We just need your social security card, and my dumbass didn't bring it, and I didn't have a car. And I was like, I don't have it. And they were like, oh, well, you need it before the end of the day or you're not going to get the job. So I was freaking out. I was like about to cry. I was like super happy I got this job, and then it could have been taken away from me in under a couple minutes. And I was like, listen, I know I'm an adult, but can I please call my mom to come pick me up, pick my driver's license and drop it off here? And they were like, oh yeah, go ahead. You got like an hour before we have to leave and everything. And I was like, okay. So I called my mom. I was in a panic. My mom had to like dig through my room to find my social because I had it. My mom didn't have it anymore. And she like rushed over to the Target. I rushed down from the little interview room. I got my social. I went back up the stairs, gave them my social. Everything was hunky-dory. And honestly, within probably a week, I think that was the fastest turnaround I had. Within a week, I got a schedule and training, and I was working. And I worked at Target for a really long time because I really liked working at Target. And the only reason I left was, again, it was an hours issue. It wasn't really something I wanted to do, but it was the point where I was making more money with my art than I was my job. And while I really liked the environment, the hours just dipped to nothing. I remember my last week, and it wasn't just me, because I remember originally thinking like maybe I'm like a bad employee, maybe that's why I don't have good hours. But there were other people that I was hired on with that had been working there a long time, like I had, who the same thing. It's like, yeah, we would be getting like 39 hours a week. And right after Christmas season, it was like, now we're getting like 16, 8, 10, 4. And it got to a point where for a 2-week shift, I had 8 hours. So that means that I would have made, back then, less than $80 in 2 weeks with the taxes cut out. Because, you know, back then you're taking taxes out. And I remember talking to my family and talking to Cody and being like, I'm making more doing my art than working at Target. And I'm just wasting gas going there. So can I try doing this art thing full time? And my parents are like, yeah, as long as you can support yourself and pay all your bills still, because be real, Target wasn't paying it anymore. And I really, at that point in my life, I really didn't want to do the whole I'm working 3 jobs again thing, because that was a time in my life where I was doing school, you know, and 3 jobs to make up one decent full-time / part-time job. And it was a very hard time for me, you know, and it was something I just didn't want to do anymore. And I was lucky enough and I worked hard enough that I was able to have a very supportive family and a very supportive partner who were okay with me making that choice. And it's a choice I never looked back on. Again, there were some rough patches, there were some dry spells, and I had to get a couple of part-time jobs after that. But they never lasted that long, mostly because the money wasn't worth it. I know it sounds bad when I was in a desperate spot, but it was like, it's not worth this mental stress when I do make more online. And those are just some of my worst interviews. And like I said, the Target one was a great experience. I just wanted to like end it on a higher note, because I try to do that with a lot of my videos, you know, where I try to like talk about something I've sit down, kids, you know, something that I've learned from my terrible experiences, or I've learned just from my life or my friends' experiences that I've witnessed. And that's why I like sharing them with you guys. And so I am happy that you guys wanted to hear this. And let me know if you guys ever want to hear some like work horror stories from my husband Cody, because he has a lot from the car industry, because he's also worked a lot of jobs in our finger quote young life, as people call it. But let me know in the comment section below. And as always, guys, I will see you next time. Bye.